Hey guys, it's Neffy. Thank you for joining me once again. As you guys know, I'm an urban apologist. I answer questions related to being Christian, being black, and being woke. And today, we're going to talk about being Christian and being woke and being all three of them on the subject of Santa Claus. I hear those sleigh bells ring a ding 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 a ding a ling tell. First of all, let me just start off by saying Christmas is a super nostalgic holiday, if nothing else. I mean, who doesn't love hot cocoa, lights, snow, even though I'm from South Florida, I have never seen it personally. The movies, the music, the atmosphere, right? The gifts. In all seriousness, like the smell of pine needles. It's just a beautiful thing. For most people, it's a very warm, fuzzy, everybody's in the mood to spend money and give things and be real giving and kind and all of that. And there are a lot of lessons, moral lessons that we teach children about the spirit of giving and gratitude and all these things around Christmas time. So I just want to start off by saying this is not an anti-Christmas video. This is a video about Santa Claus, okay? So now that we live in the age of information, people are doing a lot of research on some of the things that we've traditionally just taken for granted and reconsidering how appropriate it is to continue certain practices and traditions. And Christmas is no exception. But again, this video is not about Christmas. This video is about Santa Claus. Christians are divided on the subject. Some people feel like Christmas has pagan roots and so just leave it alone. Others feel like, well, it's really about Jesus, so who cares about what its roots were? Others are not too strong on either side, and they just don't mess with it altogether. There are tons of videos out there that discuss the pagan origins and the historical origins of Christmas and why people feel this way and the evidence for that. So I'm not going to delve too far into that because that's not the focus of what I want to talk to you guys about today. The object of this video is to point out some very interesting parallels between this character of Santa Claus and some truths that are in the Bible. So to start off, I just personally, if we want to talk about my personal feelings, which this is my video, right? So why not? My thing is what do bunny rabbits and eggs have to do with the resurrection, right? Bunny rabbits don't even lay eggs, that kind of thing. What does a man who lives at the northernmost part of the world, flies around on magical animals, and gives out gifts in exchange for offerings and whatever, have to do with the nativity, with the birth, the first advent of Jesus? The answer is nothing. They have nothing to do with one another. And to me, it's kind of like a form of syncretism. So for those of you who aren't aware, syncretism is basically the blending of two different religions to where you kind of produce a byproduct that is reminiscent of both of them, but it's also kind of its own thing. So I do agree with some of the notions that Christmas, not Christianity, although we could say that Christmas is part of Christianity, maybe, but they can be severed and Christianity will still be perfectly fine. So I don't know how integral it is. But anyway, there is some pagan origins to that, and it has become like a blended thing that we baptized and now called a Christian thing. Because even for the Christians who say, for example, that December 25th is not of pagan origin, which is the latest. And honestly, if I had time this year, I probably would do more, do a video on that, responding to one of the most popular articles that I've seen floating around, trying to say that December 25th was not chosen for some pagan reason. But that aside, let's just say it wasn't, for the sake of argument. You still have to approach and reconcile the issue of Santa Claus himself. How do you fit him into this whole birth of Jesus paradigm? I personally find it to be a form of idolatry. To have this man be such a centralized figure on a day that is supposed to be dedicated to God, to me is a form of idolatry. Now I realize I have to explain what idolatry is because we have these perceptions of what words mean or meant when they were written in the Bible and how they should apply to us today. And a lot of people think, well, ain't nobody bowing down to no Santa Claus, so that ain't idolatry. Well, let's take a closer look at that, which we will do in a moment. But let's just consider, let's take a, a backup look at Santa, okay? People line up in malls before COVID to have their kids sit on this man's lap, a stranger, and ask him for things, and he chuckles, oh, this stuff, and promises to get it for them. And they walk away happy and excited, waiting for this man to fulfill this promise. What do you want for Christmas, little boy? How is that honoring God? What does that have to do with Jesus? And then the parents exert all of this energy into trying to make the wishes of these children come true, and they feel like failures if they're not able to do it. And then the children often feel resentment if they don't get what they request. They resent their parents, they resent their life, social status, their economic status. There are a lot of negative emotions often that are tied to the holiday, and it specifically relates to either, most popularly, the lack of receiving anything. Oh, my Christmas tree was always empty. Or the lack of family being present for this particular day, which that's something, that's a different story. But the point is that people internalize these things, and it becomes part of their life as they grow up. You have people in their 40s and 50s who resent the holiday specifically because of the way they perceived their receipt of gifts or lack of receiving gifts at a young age. So it's not something that we can just brush to the side and say, well, this conversation isn't even worth having, or let's not discuss it, because it is something that is important to the lives of many people. We also have people who walk on eggshells to protect this imagination of their children surrounding this myth that has to do with Santa Claus. And they try their best to keep this myth alive as long as is socially acceptable. Now, that being said, I recognize that there's a very strong possibility that this Santa existed as a real person, and that legends and myths were created surrounding him, basically like exaggerations about his real life. Apparently, he was born in Turkey around 280 AD. He was a Christian, he was a priest, in fact, and he actually gave out gifts to children, and it kind of earned him this reputation as a protector of children. Now, some people also believed he performed miracles and it earned him the right to sainthood and all of that. But even if he was a real person, does that give us the authority then to literally idolize this man? So let's delve into idolatry a little bit more. The first and second of the 10 commandments deal specifically with idolatry. We'll find them in Exodus chapter 20, verse 3. Thou shalt have no other gods before me. That's the first commandment. And oftentimes I've seen people read this and think that it means that you can have no other gods ahead of him, as in more important than him. But that's not what it means. Before me means before my face, as in have no other gods. Basically like, don't let me see you have no other gods. Then he says, thou shalt not make unto thee any graven image or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. Thou shalt not bow down thyself to them, nor serve them. For I, the Lord thy God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children, unto the third and fourth generation of them that hate me. Notice the language is very strong here. He equates doing these things with hating him. The Bible also says you cannot serve two gods because you will love one and hate the other. You can't have two masters, right? So he's saying that if you do these things, you hate him. Now, I think another interesting part here is that he says, don't bow down to them or serve them. Meaning you don't have to physically bow down to an idol for you to be worshiping it. But some people may say, well, that's the 10 Commandments. Some people are antinomialists, meaning they didn't believe that the 10 Commandments are still binding, which that's a conversation for another day. But even if you do believe the 10 Commandments are somehow done away with, people will often refer to the council described in Acts 15 that talks about what the Gentiles were supposed to, what laws the Gentiles were supposed to follow. And idolatry is listed among those things that they should abstain from, that they should not engage in idolatry in Acts 15 verse 4. Beyond that, even in Revelation, the last book of the Bible, we see that idolatry plays a huge role in last day events. After talking about the last plagues, it says in Revelation 9 verse 20, And the rest of the men which were not killed by these plagues, yet repented not of the works of their hands, that they should not worship devils and idols of gold and silver and brass and stone and of wood, which neither can see nor hear nor walk. And then it goes on. But the point is, it's discussing something that happens in the last days. So is idolatry still an issue today? Absolutely. Jeremiah 7 provides an interesting look into something I think is relevant, particularly to this conversation as it relates to idolatry. Starting from verse 17, seest thou not what they do in the cities of Judah and in the streets of Jerusalem? The children gather wood and the fathers kindle the fire. And the women knead their dough to make cakes to the queen of heaven and to pour out drink offerings unto other God, that they may provoke me to anger. Here he's dealing specifically with offering food, not necessarily an animal sacrifice, but it's still considered a sacrifice because it's giving up something of yourself, right? It's an offering made to a deity. You're providing food and drink for another spirit, and this is a form of idolatry. Let's talk about another form of idolatry found in Colossians 3:5. Mortify therefore your members which are upon the earth, fornication, uncleanness, inordinate affection, evil concupiscence, and covetousness, which is idolatry. Covetousness, it is idolatry. The desire to have something that does not belong to you, the inordinate desire, the displeased state of desiring something that does not belong to you is a form of idolatry. Now, why would that be? It's because you have your affection set on this thing in an inappropriate degree. So the actual commandment against coveting lists all the things you should not covet, but the things that are in there are not sin to have in and of themselves. It's not a sin to have a wife, it's a sin to covet your neighbor's wife, right? It's not a sin to have a house, it's a sin to covet your neighbor's house. So having an affection for something that is greater, that you place more emphasis on that thing than you should, is a form of idolatry. And if we're being honest, you look at the Christmas holiday and it basically surrounds covetousness. It is training children for covetousness. It's having them desire to a great degree and put all this anticipation on this one day where they're supposed to receive all of their heart's desires, right? It's training them to want these things so badly and then write a letter to someone to request them and anticipate their coming there. But aside from coveting the gifts themselves, the inordinate affection placed on an object that is not God is idolatry. And so I think that also relates to this figure of Santa himself. Finally, we have Ezekiel 14 verse 4. Thus saith the Lord, every man of the house of Israel that setteth up idols in his heart, and put the stumbling block of his iniquity before his face, and cometh to the prophet, I the Lord will answer him according to the multitude of his idols. But here again, the issue is not only, because I'm not going to sever them and say that it's not having a figure. Sure, having a figure is a problem, but another problem equal to that problem is the idols that are housed in your heart. So all of this love and affection and attention that we give to this figure, who may or may not have been a real person, which is irrelevant, it does not change the fact that it's idolatry, because he's receiving attention and praise and excitement that should belong only to God, especially because he no longer exists, right? And even if he did exist, he never existed in the form that we have the mythology surrounding him. He's never existed in that form. He's never actually gone from house to house and given out gifts by sliding through your chimney. He's never done that. So we created basically a deity that we as a culture worship. There are documentaries that call him the god of capitalism. And this is why we find him in department stores. So I want to talk to you also about this practice of offering milk and cookies to Santa. Again, an offering does not require an animal sacrifice. It does not require that you kill an animal. It's still an offering. And it's something that's widely practiced in a lot of different religions. I don't think that a lot of American Christians specifically are aware of the fact that this is not just some isolated practice that just came out of nowhere. Oh, let's just leave milk and cookies for Santa. It's an idea that has been practiced in many other cultures, and it's something that syncretism, there's that syncretism again, that found its way into this particular holiday. Let's look again, Jeremiah 17:18, we just discussed this. The children gather wood, the fathers kindle the fire, and the women knead their dough to make cakes. They baking. Like, how do you bake a cookie? But they baking cakes. And they also pour out drink offerings. And this angers God. Let's read about some different cultures that practice this. Just so that you guys can see, I'm providing evidence to you that this is not just something I'm saying, but this is the reality, that this practice of offering food and drink comes from somewhere else. So this comes from the book From Earth Spirits to Sky Gods. And it says, among the people in tribal and agricultural states, sacred presences, meaning deities, are engaged through food. In India, Hindu deities are invited to inhabit the images made of them by leaving food offerings for them. These offerings are made up of food which correspond not only to the tastes of the gods and goddesses invoked, but also to the animals, minerals, colors, and sounds with which the deities are associated. This quote comes from The Spirit of Celtic Gods and Goddesses, Their History, Magical Power, and Healing Energies. Here we see Bridget of Gaelic folklore. So this is a goddess that they're talking about, Bridget. And now we come to Bridget as she has survived in folklore, particularly in Ireland and in the Highlands of Scotland. With the triumph of Christianity, the folklore concerning Bridget generally depicts her as a saint, but the symbolism surrounding her and her sacred holiday for the Catholic feast of Saint Bridget, February 1st, corresponds to the pagan celebration of Imbolc, strongly points to her pagan origins. So it's saying here that Christians have adopted this as a saint, the parallels, right? That Christians have adopted this deity as a Christian saint, but that she's clearly pagan in origin, meaning she comes from other indigenous religions, not birthed out. Folklore celebrates Bridget as a figure of healing and protection who is ceremoniously invited into the house on the eve of February 1st, the traditional beginning of spring. On this night, she is said to travel throughout the land, accompanied by her white cow, and people would leave food offerings for her, as well as straw on the ground for her to kneel on when she offers her blessings, and presumably for the cow to munch on. Interesting. She goes from house to house, leaving blessings, and people leave out food for her. And not only is she traveling, but she's traveling with an animal, and they leave out food for the animals too. Very, very interesting parallels. This final quote comes from the Encyclopedia of African Religion, Volume 1. And we'll start here where it says, many Africans, as is commonly written, continue to practice ancestor veneration. Part of the honoring practice is to offer food to the dead. Although Africans certainly understand that the person is no longer flesh, they do believe that offering food is critical to the strength of those on the other side. This use of food may be understood as a token of exchange in which the living offers the dead energy with which the dead becomes more able to offer support and guidance to the living. Therefore, the relationship between the living and the dead can be understood as highly reciprocal. So the other day I made a post about this very subject, about leaving out milk and cookies in exchange for the gifts, and people were saying, well, you don't leave out the milk and the cookies so that he'll give you the gift. No, you don't. He's supposed to do that independently of it. But it is a token of appreciation. It is a thank offering for the gift that he's bringing, and it shows a reciprocity. Like, you give me something, I give you something as well. So people leave food offerings and thank offerings to him, right? But they also pray to him, which is something that is extremely interesting. I know you guys are probably like, ain't nobody praying to Santa, but yes, they do. Children write letters to Santa with their requests for whatever it is they hope to receive on Christmas, and they send it to the North Pole. Post office says that they receive tons of these letters annually from children hoping to have their prayers reach Santa. Their letters. Now, what's interesting is this practice of writing a letter to a deity and asking for favors or written prayers is not new. It's not, again, just like the food offering, it's not something that is born out of this holiday. It didn't just pop up out of nowhere. In fact, the Jews to this day have a practice where they write down prayers on the little slips of paper and put them inside of the Western Wall, hoping to get God's attention. Not saying whether that's biblical or not. The point is that people do this, and it is a form of praying. Now, let's take a look at one of the most popular Christmas songs, from where we get a lot of our mythology surrounding this particular deity, idol, character, whatever you want to call them. The song is called Santa Claus is Coming to Town. Everybody knows the song. It was written in the 1930s and has been rewritten and performed by various artists throughout the decades, almost 100 years now. The lyrics have changed a little bit over time, but they essentially remain the same, and the theme is certainly the same. Let's take a look at some of the themes that come from this song. Here are the lyrics. Now, the essence of the message is that you must behave appropriately because he's watching and he's going to reward you according to your behavior. Let's look at he sees you when you're sleeping. He knows when you're awake. The point here is that Santa's always watching. You cannot escape his gaze. In what ways is this a ripoff of the God of the Bible? In order for him to see when you're sleeping and know when you're awake, that would mean that he can't be sleeping. It means that he would have to be watching you all the time. And we know that from other mythology that he lives in the North Pole. So how is he watching you all the time from the North Pole? He must be omniscient and omnipresent. Let's take a look at how this is a ripoff of the God of the Bible. Psalm 139 verse 2. You know when I sit down and when I rise up. You discern my thoughts from afar. You search out my path and my lying down and are acquainted with all my ways. That's God. We're not talking about Santa. We're talking about the God of the Bible. He sees everything. Santa's claiming to see everything. God sees everything. Psalm 121 verse 4. Behold, he who keeps Israel will neither slumber nor sleep, because he's always watching. Point number 2. He's making a list, he's checking it twice, he's gonna find out who's naughty or nice. So not only is he watching, but he's recording. He's making a list, and he's making a record of behaviors. This is something we are taught explicitly in the Bible that God himself is doing. He is writing down our actions, and he is classifying people into either good or bad based on these behaviors. And we either go into the book of life or onto the naughty list. The other book. Revelation 20 verse 12. And I saw the dead, small and great, stand before God, and the books were opened, and another book was opened, which is the book of life. And the dead were judged out of those things which were written in the books according to their works. So what's written in the books? Their works. And they're written either in the book of life or in the other books. And whosoever is written in the other books go to the lake of fire. Revelation 20:15. And whosoever was not found written in the book of life was cast into the lake of fire. With Santa, what's interesting is that when someone misbehaves and they find themselves on the naughty list, they receive lumps of coal, which are used for burning. But if they're on the nice list, then they receive gifts and presents. Interesting also is that the mythology surrounding Santa, not in the United States, but in other nations, has this mythological creature featured by the name of Black Pete, who is the one who actually hands out the coal. And this is what Black Pete looks like. Very interesting. Now, another interesting thing is that your name can be blotted out of the book of life. Exodus 32:31. And Moses returned unto the Lord and said, Oh, this people have sinned a great sin, and have made them gods of gold. Yet now, if thou wilt, forgive their sin. And if not, blot me, I pray thee, out of the book which thou hast written. And the Lord said unto Moses, Whosoever hath sinned against me, him will I blot out of my book. I don't know what happens if your name ain't in that book. It's either going to be in one book or the other book. Point number 3. Santa Claus is coming to town. I mean, that's the title of the song, right? Santa Claus is coming. All right, so who's coming again? Is it Santa that we should anticipate coming again? Or is it Jesus? Jesus is coming again. Jesus is coming again. The point of the record keeping is because he's coming again to reward people according to the record that he's already made. Santa comes once a year, which is interesting because it's kind of reminiscent of the Day of Atonement, which was once a year, and that was a shadow of what we call Judgment Day, which doesn't happen once a year, it happens once and for all. But yeah. Revelation 22:12. And behold, I come quickly, and my reward is with me, to give every man according as his work shall be. I am Alpha and Omega, the beginning and the end, the first and the last. So that's Jesus talking. And he's coming to give rewards based on, so does Santa just come? There's a whole process. Like he sees you when you're sleeping, he knows when you're awake, you better be good for goodness sake, all that stuff, because he's watching in order that he may come. He's making this record prior to his coming, which is the same thing the Bible says about God, that he is in the process of making these lists and checking them, right? He is in the process of investigating and judging before he actually returns. He doesn't just return and carry out judgment. What we call Judgment Day is really like an announcement of the judgment he's already made. Consider, for example, a trial, right? A criminal trial where there's either a judge or a jury. The jury goes back behind the scenes, they take a look at the evidence and they deliberate, and then they make a decision. The decision is not made at the moment of the announcement. The decision was already made behind the scenes, and then they come forward to announce what they've already decided. And it's the same thing with Judgment Day. God is not coming to judge. He's coming because he's already judged, and he's announcing the judgment that he's already arrived at when he was reviewing the books before he came. Acts 17:30, and the times of this ignorance God winked at, but now commandeth all men everywhere to repent, because he hath appointed a day in the which he will judge the world in righteousness by that man whom he hath ordained, whereof he hath given assurance unto all men, in that he has raised him from the dead. Santa make a record. He lists and then he delivers according to the decisions he's already made. When Jesus comes, it will be the same. So this is another way that Santa is ripping off God. So when is that judgment taking place? When is the decision being made surrounding the second coming, which we know is near? The decision is being made right now. Before Christ comes, he says, Revelation 22:11, he that is unjust, let him remain unjust. And he which is filthy, let him be filthy still. He that is righteous, let him be righteous still. And he that is holy, let him be holy still. Because a lot of people have this misperception that once they see God, they'll be able to repent. They'll repent because they've seen Jesus. So in conclusion, this video is not intended to shame anyone for celebrating Christmas. I'm not even on that. The point is to show you that you may or may not be engaging in idolatry. It is not okay to allow your children to pray to some spirit and leave offering in exchange for gifts that they want. Just, let them engage in idolatry for a few years. It's good for them. Like what? They're not pretending. You're pretending. You're pretending that Santa exists because you in your mind, you know he doesn't or whatever, but you're allowing them to think that he does. So they are actually engaging in the practice of idolatry, and you're training them to do so. You're training them to set their hearts on another God. You're training them to have faith that this other deity will provide for them the things that they desire. Most importantly, Santa claims abilities and authority that only God has. That's both blasphemy and idolatry. Guard your hearts, family. God is not telling us these things because he desires to be angry with us. He's telling us these things because he desires that our hearts be pure and that we're at one with him, that there be nothing between us that causes a separation between him and ourselves. His desire is that we repent out of love, both out of love for him and his love for us. As usual, if you guys have any questions, feel free to comment. If you have not already subscribed, please do that. I always forget to ask you guys to subscribe, but I figured you'd do it. You know how YouTube works, you know what I'm saying? Like, comment, subscribe, share. I try my best to respond to comments. If you have any questions, feel free to email me. If you want to keep it private, neff@neffernitty.com. Thank you for watching. Stay Christian, stay black, stay woke.